A phantom or specter, a menace or friend. Curious tales of the unnatural kind. Welcome to Eidolon. Welcome to episode 4 of Eidolon. I'm Amy, and we're going to go in for some local haunts and history to Albany, New York, where Ryan and I live just outside of. It's time we shared the haunts closest to home. Five haunted places in Albany, New York you need to visit. New York's Capital District boasts several different interesting things about being the seat of government for the Empire State. The city of Albany is the oldest continuous settlement of the first 13 colonies. We're the home of perforated toilet paper, your butts are welcome, and we even coined the phrase a baker's dozen in the 1800s, so you're also welcome for that extra donut. Another fact of Albany's lengthy history is that it's older than New York City, and some would even say that for that very reason, it's more haunted too. I can tell you I've definitely had my run-ins with city ghosts on the downtown blocks of yesteryear. So check out my 5 favorite haunted places in the city of Albany, New York. Number 1. The Capitol Building. Albany's Capitol Building not only took 30 years to complete, but it's the largest and most ostentatious Capitol building in the nation. The architecture is astounding, with the grand staircase being the showpiece. The building has claimed 2 lives, though. Between the late 1800s and 1911, 2 men met their untimely demises within the stone behemoth. Construction foreman Cormac McWilliams fell from the scaffolding as he was working in the assembly chamber and died on impact. In 1911, the Capitol fire took place, burning precious Dutch archive material and original records of the city. All of these books, papers, records, extremely old written items, had been put in the library in the Capitol in one section. And we know from so many photos and writings, there's a few documentaries you can see, Albany crammed its most important works all within one space in the Capitol. This was a fire hazard waiting to happen. It's horrifying to look at what they did. Now, so much of the material was about to be stored in a different building that was being built. We had the education building going up as well. But before any material could be sorted out, and as more paper was being added to the Capitol building, it just looked worse and worse. Anyone living now would have looked at all the paper and the books and the myriad of shelves crammed into the Albany Capitol in 1911 and been horrified. The scariest thing about this fire is that the cause of it is still not definitively known. It's been said assembly members were in the interior room where the fire began and were smoking cigars. Again, smoking anything around so many books in any sort of library setting. Again, the horror, I know. But it's been said lit embers in a wastebasket from one of the assemblymen may have been the cause. This is all alleged. Now, after that fire, 78-year-old night watchman and Civil War veteran Samuel Abbott perished in the flames after trying to save the priceless paper artifacts. Since those events, the assembly chamber has been rumored to be haunted, and the sounds of phantom jingling keys and clicking locks can be heard, as though Mr. Abbott is still doing his rounds about the building. The hauntings aren't terribly frightening, though. They seem to be just the residual activities of the men who were doing their jobs when they passed away. Number 2, historic Cherry Hill. The ghost story of Cherry Hill dates back to the untimely death of John Whipple almost 200 years ago in the dining room of this beautiful, yellow-painted, Dutch gambrel-roofed home. The 1787 house was the site of a crime of passion involving couple Elise Lansing Whipple and her husband John. They boarded there in one of the basement rooms of the large Dutch home near the Hudson River, but love blossomed between Elise and a man named Jesse Strang. After she secured Jesse a job at the house doing handiwork, the two of them plotted the murder of her husband in order to be together. Unfortunately, they didn't have true crime documentaries to reroute their terrible idea, and on a rainy evening in 1827, Strang aimed his pistol at John through a lit window in the home where he was eating. The bullet killed John, and the plot was quickly uncovered. When Elise and Jesse were tried for John's murder, Elise was acquitted, but Jesse was convicted and hanged at what was then the Gallows Hill of Albany. The site of that public execution is now one area of the Empire State Plaza, and to this day people have heard footsteps throughout the home of Cherry Hill and even seen the silhouette of what could be John Whipple in the home, still eating where he met his end. Number 3. The Schuyler Mansion. The Schuyler Mansion has long been one of Albany's most prized historic landmarks. The large brick home is over 250 years old and was the childhood home of Eliza Hamilton, wife of Alexander. Her popularity has grown since her husband's musical hit Broadway, and the interior parlor on the south side of the home was where Eliza and Alexander were married. And they regularly returned to the home to visit their family with their own children later in life. The ghostly happenings from within the old structure are said to be centered more around Eliza than anyone else, including transparent visages of their 18th century clothing seen briefly from one's peripheral vision. Footsteps on the original wood floors of the second-floor salon between the bedrooms are a more common occurrence, and several doors within the home apparently refuse to stay shut. Docents and tour guides of this state-owned property have reported the heavy interior shutters opening and closing on their own as well, and walking into uncanny cold spots. Voices calling out or speaking in nearby rooms have even been heard from the areas where there was no living person. There's a lot happening at Schuyler Mansion. Number 4. The State Education Building. The State Education Building is one of Albany's most distinguished architectural feats, and the columnade along the exterior is a true work of art. Construction began in 1908 and was finally complete and the building dedicated in 1912. It's what allegedly happened between those years that has become one of the city's most gruesome legends. An Italian laborer went missing during the first phase of construction when the foundation was being laid. The man showed up to work and stored his lunch and personal belongings where he normally did, but after the workday was done, the other laborers came across his belongings, but he was nowhere to be found. The theory goes that he fell into the foundation excavations, and with no one knowing he had been down there, concrete was poured over his body, ultimately entombing him in the building. Stories from construction workers at the Alfred E. Smith building across the street, erected several years later, were passed through the ranks somewhere between truth and legend. It's even been said that the state education building foreman knew of what had happened, but with construction already behind schedule, he didn't want to stop the work to find the man so as not to delay it any further. You can already guess whose ghost is said to be seen and heard roaming the massive halls and rooms of the education building to this day. Sadly, no one's going to be digging for the truth of this legend anytime soon, so the legend, and perhaps the ghost, live on. Number 5. The Tenbrook Mansion. Built for the Brigadier General Abraham Tenbrook and his wife Elizabeth Van Rensselaer Tenbrook, they enjoyed barely more than a decade there before their deaths and passed the large home to their children. Subsequent owners stayed and left until the Olcott family moved in and updated the space for the mid-1800s. The original architectural features of the inside are beautifully restored, and once sealed in the basement for decades is an intact wine cellar. There are an astounding number of EVPs or electronic voice phenomena that have been captured on audio devices of every kind in this 1798 federal-style mansion that overlooks the Hudson River. While the city encroached upon the once sprawling acreage of the Tenbrook estate, the Living House Museum now stands on the eastern end of one city block of property. The ghosts rumored to roam the property have long been passed in the form of folklore by those who once worked patrolling the home in the mid-1900s, and guests, staff, investigators, and docents alike throughout the years. The door of the second-floor master bedroom has a habit of slamming closed on its own. I've heard it. I've known those who've seen it happen, and even captured the sound on audio recorder. The home is open for daytime tours and on occasion is opened for a portion of a ghost walk tour in the city on Halloween. These are 5 of my most favorite haunts in the city of Albany. The city is incredibly historic, and several of the earliest buildings from the 1600s remain in the city and surrounding county. And we're lucky for so much past to be present now, physically. Does the land and the architecture hold the echoes of former people? We think they do. In what capacity, we can't say for sure, but the ghosts of Albany are likely out there, still watching the city rush by. Alright, we're talking about Haunted Albany, and this is obviously a subject that I'm pretty familiar with simply because I grew up in the area, in a suburb just west of it, and learning to drive when I was 16, 17, was driving on these god-awful ramps and overpasses and underpasses that just encompass the whole waterfront of downtown Albany, and it was terrifying. But now I'm old and I can drive. But Albany's a weird place because from certain angles, like when you cross the river from the east, it looks like a pretty cool city and it looks sizable. Then you take an off-ramp and you get down in there and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? It's all ramps and it's highways, the first thing you see at the waterfront. We have a waterfront park. It's not the original waterfront because originally the area of water, the body of water of the Hudson River there was wider, quite a bit wider, and it was filled with lots of little islands and sandbars. Waterways where the highway boats were our infrastructure of transportation for so long that so much was done to the river and the riverfront of Albany over time to make it so bigger, deeper boats could pass through, that the little islands are gone. You have to go up or down the river to see kind of more of what the Hudson looked like originally, because in the Albany, like right between Albany and Rensselaer on both sides, the waterfront is completely different. It's a lot of concrete, a lot of roads, a lot of cars, and there's been talk forever like, oh, what do we do about this to bring back our nice waterfront? Well, was it nice? Listen, we threw our garbage into the river for so long that for much of its life it was a bit of a cesspool. Stinky. So part of my never getting in a time machine to see old Albany is what it smelled like. But just up the hill from the riverbank, there is another place that has rumors of a haunting. And there's a park that was created called Lincoln Park, and it has a giant swimming pool in the summer. And it's on a hill. It's very hilly, Albany, obviously, on the one side by the river, because you got a river carved out by a glacier and you have a landscape that goes up the hill. So this park was built in such a way on a hill in that it encompasses an old stream. There used to be a lot more creeks and open waterways running through the city, obviously before we paved and built those infrastructures of sewer systems, etc. So enclosing streams and creeks, that's what happens when you build an entire swath of area to make a city. Those waterways get underground. And one of those is at Lincoln Park, and it's got this gully on its north side. It's next to what's called the Hinkle Brewery, and that's now apartments, but it was an old brewery. It's a gorgeous building, really funky, interesting apartments inside. You know when you gotta shape an old building to be accommodations, and it just turns out weird? And there's walkways and angles and windows to courtyard. It's one of those types of buildings, but there's rumors of hauntings in there as well. Odd little side note, I don't know who listens to this, but a long time ago in 2017, one of those apartments was being re-rented, and some friends and I were able to go over, walk in it, and investigate it just in the early evening while, other people were in their apartments nearby. And, we gave it the old try, kind of half-assed, to be honest. We were mostly just having fun and getting to see this other apartment. There's other context to why we went to that particular apartment. I'm just going to leave all that out for privacy reasons, but that was kind of the first little place that I investigated when I was like, I'm going to call myself Full Dark Productions. Anyhow, right across the street from that, on a hill, is the Lincoln Park Gully, and it's an enclosed stream, and man, it's, to be honest, it's full of garbage. Now, that's a place where it's really easy to just chuck something over a little hillside and not see your garbage again, and a lot of people do. It's a city, what are you gonna do? I don't think I'd want to spend a whole bunch of time there in the dead of night. It's not really a place to investigate, because that is also an area where people are on substances and you might not be safe. I'm also a 5'2" woman. Where am I to feel safe? in the dark. One time this one guy, a friend of mine, was like, yo, you should do some exercise and run along the riverfront Albany Park. You can go at night. And I was like, what the fuck? This is a city, and there's people who are going to be trying to do things at night that aren't good to people. You just never know what's going to happen. And shit happens in the day, So there's this Lincoln Park gully that has rumors of hauntings that have to do with when the city was settled, like colonial era, late 1700s. I don't know. Maybe that's just when enough people were settled and enough ghosts were talked about that a lot of the legends of Albany seem to start around the 1700s with these colonial ghosts, which is kind of cool. I'm still kind of waiting to see one. I have seen something in Albany. That is a vlog, a video on our channel that if you would like to see me talk about exactly what I saw in Albany that very well could be tied, again, if you want to use ghost logic, to somebody specific from the 17 into 1800s Albany. So just side note, Lincoln Park Gully, rumors of hauntings over there as well. And through some more research, what's weird and crazy and cool is that there is the known location of the Albany gallows where people were hung for crimes in a space in Albany, which is now an art exhibition space and a concert space. And it's the very central location of downtown called the Plaza. And it's where there's reflection pools that become skating rinks in the winter. I've never actually skated there, not once, but I have seen Joan Jett perform on the steps of the New York State Museum that leads down into the plaza where they make a stage. It's up along the area of the plaza there, one of the public spaces where the gallows used to be located, top of the hill, above the river. So there are reports of people seeing shadows and people that aren't there in the Albany Plaza, in this big open space. It's where the fireworks on the 4th of July are set off. But it's really neat that enough information has been written down and known about and made it to the internet that makes it able for us to research and find out these very specific spaces where some very dire situations did take place in Albany. And wouldn't you know it, there's all sorts of little spots where people have claimed to see things. There's a section of old trolley and railroad tracks under a paved brick section of, it's not Hamilton Street, but one of the stories is that in April, on the anniversary of Lincoln's death train, his body was laid in state on a train, and they did a Northeast tour before he was buried, and Albany was one of the stops. So on the anniversary, it said you can hear and see Lincoln's ghost train coming up where the old tracks used to be. And wouldn't you know it, there's a few cities that have this exact same ghost story. And I would love it if everyone who cared in April got out there on the street at night to try and see the ghost train. I don't know, maybe one year we could do this big like Lincoln's ghost train event and we all try for a couple hours in the evening. Nice spring evening, spring ghost hunt. Anyhow, the Lincoln ghost train, the Lincoln Park Gully. You see, Lincoln was like a big deal here, right? He once visited Albany at the same time that John Wilkes Booth was performing in a local theater. Ooh, spooky synchronicity. And then there's also the place of the known gallows, which directly correlates to the Cherry Hill murder I talked to you about in the episode when I recorded this a while back. Oh, and the story of the guy being buried in the wall of the state building, it seems to be so legend. Like, it's so very not true. And like a lot of the unsubstantiated details that help bolster it are also kind of very likely made up. But what a good story, right? What a potentially good story. Listen, for real, there is a devil, a tiny, kind of thumb-sized little devil face carved into the New York State Capitol, right at the bottom of the $1 million staircase. No one knows who carved it, why it's there, but that one's real. The man in the foundation of the giant columned education building, not so much. So if you need some reality, look for the weird carved things in the staircase, and know that there are far more legends and stories in Albany than you would ever think. This has been episode 5 of Eidolon. I'm Amy Bennett-Bradway. Thanks for listening. Stay weird.